ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everybody had a nice weekend. I'd like to welcome everyone who's currently tuned in on the broadcast right here. I can see Sherry, Alicia, PJ, Alan, Jane, Michael, Alice, Monique. How are we, guys? It's great to have you guys here, as it always is. And it's a nice day today. It's Monday, of course. So I'd like to welcome everyone who is tuned in live right now. And also welcome to people watching the replay. That's right. We're going to replay this show at 9:30 tonight. That's right. So this is the format that I've worked out tends to get the best coverage. So we do a live broadcast, which could happen sporadically at different times during the week. But you can count on the replay being aired on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That's the schedule that I'm wanting to stick to here at 9:30 p.m. So the good news is that if you can't jump on live, you can always catch the replay. And of course, I always chop the broadcast up into smaller sections and publish them throughout the week as well. Alan says you love being here. Thank you. And I love the fact that each and every one of you are here right now. Gary says don't vote Major. That is a very, very good suggestion. Too bad the people of Western Australia did not take that advice, right? We saw a massive landslide victory for Labor in Western Australia. Western Australia now really beginning to resemble a one-party system. One-party systems, of course, used in authoritarian states around the world, such as China. Where was the Liberal Party? What were they doing in the WA election? I think they were hiding in the corner somewhere, maybe a little bit scared to come out. So anyway, please go ahead and share the broadcast. It's really great to see you guys, as it always is. Zena says WA is embarrassing. You're right. That is certainly one way of putting it. All right, so let's get to it. There's a lot of information. Maybe I've put too much information into this show, so you're certainly able to come and go. There's no obligations. You don't have to stay for the whole thing, obviously, and you can always catch the replay. All right, rightio. So first of all, Telegram, as you guys know, we don't know how long Facebook will be around for. I like using Telegram. It's my preferred method of getting information out there. I post a lot more on Telegram than I do on Facebook, especially in regards to news articles and information. So you can follow me on Telegram. That's at Morgan C. Jonas. And that way you'll make sure that you never miss out. You can also head over to my website. That's mcjreport.com. And on the homepage, you can put your email address in. And what I've started doing is sending emails out before the replay of every show and referencing every article that I speak about. So you can see what we spoke about on the show, and then you can read through all of the articles in more detail. So I've gone and subscribed to an email plan, which gives me enough emails that I need so I can send it out to you guys on a regular basis. I'd like to thank people who support the show. If you'd like to support the show, you can head over to mcjreport.com/support. And of course, your support is greatly appreciated. It means that we can keep working on our objectives here. And of course, I just wanted to remind you that if you're going through a difficult time, I would certainly prefer that you do not support at this stage. I've been there myself. So please don't put any extra strain on you, only if you can afford to. Okay. All right, so Germany, maybe some of you saw the news, but Germans are out protesting lockdowns. It marks 12 months now of protests in Germany. The pro-freedom people are hitting the streets to express concerns in a way very similar to which we are also expressing concerns. They're against the lockdowns, the emergency powers, the prospect of mandatory vaccines and so forth. Now, German police have been very heavy-handed with the German people, resembling scenes like what we've seen from Victoria. So I've got a clip here from Germany. It goes for about 5 minutes, but I'm going to show it to you guys. And it really reminds us that we're not alone, and the suffering that so many of us are experiencing right now is also being experienced by people all over the world. So I'm going to play that for you. Let me just get the screen up and running. Let me just make sure that it's working, and it is. So I'm going to play this right now.
Gewaltfeststellungen durchgeführt werden. Halten Sie dazu Ihr... Müssen hier Identitätsüberprüfungen durchgeführt werden? Wunderbar. Einmal verfolgen, bitte. Richtungskirche neben den grünen... Diese beiden Orte.
Yeah, so as you can see, there's some pretty disturbing scenes. The German police enforcing the non-evidence-based abusive policies of their government, as police are doing all around the world. So a big congratulations to everybody from Germany who got out to protest against this, what can really only be described as tyranny. German police acting in ways which resemble people that came before them in their own country less than 100 years ago. And at the end there, you saw some armored vehicles. You saw a vehicle that looked like a military vehicle. Very disturbing scenes, of course, of the police being very heavy-handed with what can only be described as peaceful protesters. Well, my message to police, and I suppose police all over the world, is that our movement, our freedom movement, is growing bigger and bigger by the day. Every day that goes past, more and more people are becoming aware of these non-evidence-based restrictions that have been imposed on us. And the day will come very soon that millions regularly march all around the world. And when that day comes, police will be left with no other choice but to stand to the side and to allow the people to have their way. Police around the world are standing on the wrong side of history. Instead of representing the needs of the people, instead of protecting the people, they're actually protecting the career interests of the politicians and the corporate interests of the pharmaceutical corporations. So much for taking an oath, right? Police here in Australia, all around the world, they took an oath to protect the public. Instead, they're protecting the most predatory people within our societies and spitting in the face of the public. So I'll certainly be addressing that in my speeches going forward. All right, moving on here. This was pretty interesting. This was reported on 7 News. Maybe some of you saw this. Coming from Guild Insurance regarding the people who have taken the COVID-19 vaccine. Specifically, it says that they have temporarily paused the issuing of new policies for nurses who are participating in the COVID-19 vaccine program. Now, why do you think that is? Could this be suggesting that Guild Insurance is not confident that those nurses that take the COVID-19 vaccine will be healthy afterwards? Have they speculated that covering these people with insurance policies could pose too much of a risk to their bottom line, perhaps out of the likelihood of insurance claims and the insurance claims that could arise from it? Now, the government's trying very hard to reiterate their confidence in the vaccine and to strongly suggest that Australians should have the utmost confidence in the vaccine. Yet we see this insurance company here not willing to issue policies. We see what's going on all over Europe in regards to the Astrazeneca vaccine, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. So why do you think it is? Why do you think Guild Insurance is making this amendment? Put that in the comments. And then there's this guy right here, the WA Premier, who has shown that he's pretty similar to Daniel Andrews in many ways, willing to shut down the entire state over one case, never proving beyond reasonable doubt whether that case or positive PCR test meant that somebody was posing an infection risk. They never provide any evidence whatsoever. They simply expect us to take our word for it. And this Premier, Mark McGowan, has won in a landslide. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to get to the articles, and let's start going through it. We've got a lot to go through, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so WA election. Here are the results here. ALP, this is the lower house, 50 seats. Liberals 2, Nationals 3. So Nationals actually outscoring the Liberals. So as you can see, based on this graph right here, looking very much like a one-party system. Where were the Liberals? God only knows. So we've also got some results here from the Legislative Council, a little bit more balanced. As you can see, WA Labor 14, Liberals 9, Nationals 4. Okay, shooters, fishers and farmers in the crossbench, but Greens with a dominating force in the crossbench with 4 seats, holding the balance of power, meaning that any legislation that is put forward to the Legislative Council must have approval from the Greens before it is enacted. That's right, the Greens really holding the ultimate position of power now in the Western Australian Parliament. So if you're from Western Australia, how do you feel about these election results? Put that in the comments. How do you feel about the prospect of a federal election later this year? I have been speaking to some people from Western Australia, so I'm going to have an independent on our show. We're going to do an interview because I'd like to give a voice to people who are looking to challenge this system. So if you're from Western Australia, or if you're looking to stand up and challenge in the federal election, or if you know someone who is, why don't you get in touch with me? I'm more than happy to have them on the show. I want to give you a voice. And this is one of the major objectives of the MCJ Report. Not just to cover news from Australia and overseas, but I want to give a voice to those looking to stand up and do the right thing. So you can send me a message on Facebook, and I do check all my messages. Sometimes I may be delayed by a few days. My inbox is getting pretty inundated these days, so I'd like to thank everyone who's reaching out, but I will get to it. All right, moving on here. There's been an interesting rumor going around. Now, I just want to emphasize that it's a rumor which cannot be independently verified. The rumor goes along the lines of that Daniel Andrews was at the home of Lindsay Fox and fell down the stairs. Now, I don't believe that can be proven, but here's an article here which is pretty interesting from February this year, summarizing Daniel Andrews' relationship with the Fox family. So I'm not going to read through it with you, but it's pretty interesting the amount of times he's been over to their house, the super expensive wine and champagne they drink, bottles worth thousands of dollars. You know, Daniel Andrews, painting himself as the union guy, the guy that supposedly says he cares for workers and so forth, and then acting like the elitist that he is. So once again, mcjreport.com, sign up for my newsletter. I'll send you the article. I also put it on my Telegram page as well at Morgan C. Jonas. All right, so here is some non-corona related news. I know that we speak about corona and vaccines so much, but it's also important we do not ignore the other important issues facing our country. I was horrified to read this article, and this was coming yesterday from the Herald Sun. I'm going to talk to you about it. Man who wed 12-year-old cousin could be allowed into Victoria. A man who married his 12-year-old cousin was blocked from coming to Australia, but a judge has quashed that ruling, opening the door for his move to Victoria. Okay, so we've got a judge which is essentially opening the door to a pedophile moving to Victoria, people that we should never allow into our country. I'm going to read to you here. A Lebanese man who married his 12-year-old cousin and fathered 2 children with her before she was 16 could be allowed into Australia. They married in Lebanon in 2005, and Mr. Kodur moved back to her home. Miss Kodur moved back to her home in Victoria in 2013, bringing her children with her. In an application by Mr. Kodur for an Australian visa so he could join his family here was rejected in 2019, as it should be rejected. Okay, this man married a child. This man raped a child by then Immigration Minister David Coleman. David Coleman, who did the right thing. Mr. Kodur appealed that decision in the federal court. Judge Mordechai Bromberg last week quashed Mr. Coleman's refusal to give Mr. Kodur a visa. So he's opened the door back up. It says here, in his ruling, Justice Bromberg said the 2005 marriage of Mr. and Ms. Kodur in Lebanon when he was 21 and she was 12 was, quote, lawful under Lebanese law and consistent with Sharia law. Well, I've got a message for Justice Bromberg, and that is that here in Australia, we have Australian law. We're not under Lebanese law or Sharia law. Child marriage is immoral. It is pedophilia. It is predatory. and it attacks the most vulnerable people in our society, which are children. So what this Judge Bromberg is saying here is he's using a concept called cultural relativism. He's essentially telling the Australian public, he's saying, well, it's accepted in that part of the world, therefore, who are we to judge? Well, who are we to judge? It's not a matter of judging, it's a matter of right and wrong, it's a matter of protecting children, and it's a matter of protecting Australian society from pedophiles and sexual predators, which is the man of which Justice Bromberg is now opening the door to allow back into our country. I mean, this is a very, very concerning reflection on certain people such as this judge, this justice that's in a tremendous position of power in our country. The article goes on to say, Mr. Couture said if a daughter of his wanted to get married, she could, as long as she reached puberty, and that could be 11, 12, or 13. It is fine with me. So that's what this individual said, that could be coming back to Australia. He has no problem marrying off his daughters at the age of 11, 12, and 13. This is the type of person, this is the type of mentality we need to keep out of Australia by any means necessary. Is this real life? In what crazy backwoods world would a country welcome in pedophiles and sexual predators? It goes down here, it says, Mr. Coleman described Mr. Couture's actions as immoral and offensive. Yes, absolutely immoral, offensive, criminal, and all of the above. And Mr. Coleman, who was the minister at the time, said, if Mr. Couture's visa is granted and he came to live in Australia and obtained similar employment, I consider this could provide him with a platform to espouse his views regarding marriage and consummation of marriage with female children, including those under the age of 16. A very legitimate concern, and a concern that we should all have. Mr. Coleman said Mr. Couture's conduct in acting on an attraction to a child aged under 10, marrying that child when she was 12, and having 2 children with her before she turned 16, was repugnant to the expectations and standards of the Australian community. Yeah, I mean, we really can't say that better ourselves. This is the exact opposite of what we expect from adults within our society. It says here, but the minister said it was his view that at the time Ms. Couture married, she was an immature child who was incapable of consenting to marriage or sexual relations. Of course, she is a victim. She was raped. She was subjected to a child marriage, something that no child should ever be subjected to. And the man guilty of committing crimes against her looks like he has a pathway into Australia. I know I seem to be repeating myself. It's just that I almost can't believe what I'm reading. It looks like we're going backwards in Australia instead of moving forwards. Says here, in considering Mr. Couture's present conduct, I find it's indicative of a continued belief in and support for underage relationships, marriage, and sexual relations with persons who become child brides, Mr. Coleman said in his written reasons for refusing to grant Mr. Couture a visa. We all agree with that. Mr. Coleman made a sound judgment. It's common sense. Goes on to say, it is my view that the Australian community would not expect a person holding the views professed by Mr. Couture to be granted a visa. However, in the ruling last week, Justice Bromberg said the minister was wrong. He was wrong to treat Mr. Couture's belief as present general conduct, and that the minister had, quote, failed to carry out his statutory task in the manner required of him. So Bromberg disagrees. Bromberg says, no, it's okay. Mr. Couture has done nothing wrong. Who are we to judge him? It's cultural relativism, so if it's okay in wherever this person came from, then it should be okay here. Justice Bromberg ordered that Mr. Couture's case be remitted to the Immigration Minister for the redetermination of the applicant's application for a visa according to law. He ordered the Immigration Minister to pay the costs, which means he ordered the taxpayer to pay the costs. That's right, to pay the cost to a pedophile of Mr. Couture's successful judicial review. What an absolute disgrace. I am ashamed of this. This cannot be Australia, ladies and gentlemen. Something massive has to change. We've got justices like this working in the federal courts, sympathising with a man that raped a young girl. This is absolutely despicable. And this is him right there, speaking somewhere, big goofy grin on his face, Life's good for this guy, right? Justice Bromberg, making plenty of money, undermining the decency of our society. So it's utterly disgusting. And put in the comments what you think about this. All right, moving forward here. Okay, so we've got some information here from 9 News regarding a new sticker to monitor possible infections. I'm going to play this clip for you. It's 1 minute 46.
That can warn you about the onset of coronavirus is about to go into mass production here in Queensland. Developed by our scientists, the patches are worn on your arm and can warn you about other diseases as well.
A small device that can save lives, beaming results straight to your phone.
So we do a scan, you have a readout.
While the easily worn patches called micro-wearables don't tell doctors whether a patient has COVID or other diseases, what they do reveal is how your immune system is responding. It can detect whether people are dehydrated, about to become critically ill with coronavirus, or are about to have a heart attack.
The technology allows for monitoring and testing of just about anything you can test with a blood test.
The stickers will first be available to hospitals and industries like defence and mining, with a long-term plan for them to become publicly available.
They're all about buying time for people.
It's hoped 90 new jobs will be created in Queensland to manufacture around 26 million patches a year. Rural communities set to benefit most.
Instead of people needing to get on a plane and go to hospitals, or dare I say not even make it because they haven't had the chance for intervention to take place, our type of micro-wearable sensor, when rolled out, can make a massive impact in that.
The government is contributing taxpayer funds to the project, but won't say how much.
As is the case with these kinds of arrangements, the contribution is commercial in confidence.
Tim Arvia, 9 News.
All right, so there you go. We're looking at a new sticker to monitor possible infections. You know, everybody used to tease and poke fun at people that spoke about the possibility of microchips. Now that possibility is seeming more and more plausible. So we see a gradual progression of demand by the government, mandates. You know, it started off with the face masks, coercing people into getting tested. Now we see, of course, what's happening with the COVID-19 vaccine, the COVID passports, the Prime Minister speaking about whether or not people can go to bars and restaurants unless they can prove they've been vaccinated, a little sticker to put on your wrist. What is next? We see a progression. I personally don't think it's unrealistic, the notion of some type of inserted chip. The technology exists in the world. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's used in Europe. I believe there's certain companies in Sweden, you can go and look this up, that have allowed their employees to be, quote, microchipped, and it allows them to open doors and tracks their lunchtime breaks and things like that. So I don't like where this is all heading. I think that we all should be in charge of our bodies. We know if we're dehydrated. We know if we're not feeling well. So I wanted to show that to you because this is very real. And the way it's presented, you know, we've got the reporter here. She's got a big goofy smile on her face like, yeah, this is totally good. This is totally normal. But of course, I think more and more Australians are waking up to the propaganda spread by the mainstream media anyway, moving forward. All right, moving on to The Age. This was from a week and a half ago. Constitutional meddling means Andrews could govern from the grave. That's right, Daniel Andrews seeking to change the Victorian Constitution. This is a good article here. I'm going to read it to you. This is from Anika Smethurst. It says here, at the last state election, Labor vowed that a re-elected Andrews government would ban hydraulic fracturing or fracking and coal steam gas exploration. Quote, only Labor will keep the ban for good, Daniel Andrews said at the time. What he meant by that was that his government was willing to go further than simply passing laws to ban fracking. It would entrench this policy in the Victorian Constitution, thereby making it harder for future governments to change. It says here, yesterday that bill received support from the majority of Victoria's upper house. All right, so this is a week and a half ago. Even the Liberal Party, which has traditionally rallied against such illiberal ideas, put up little fight. Little fight, right? Like in Western Australia, very little fight. Michael O'Brien is hiding in a corner somewhere. In doing so, the Parliament has effectively bound future democratically elected governments to this policy. Jamming it in the Constitution means any future state government will require 3/5 majority of both houses to amend it. Very, very, very difficult to amend, 3/5. I mean, you look at how tight the vote was for the state of emergency in the Legislative Council, and that should give you, 3/5. It seems like an almost impossibility anytime in the foreseeable future. Putting aside the merits of a fracking ban for one moment, it's important to ask whether any policy is so exemplary that it is worth entrenching in this way. That's right, and what comes next? What will Daniel Andrews further wish to change in the Victorian Constitution? Could it be something in regards to diversity quotas? Could it be something in regards to public gatherings, protesting the government? Who knows? I wouldn't put anything past this man. Says here, as Victorians, we should be wary of any attempt to weaken our democracy. Right, like what Daniel Andrews has done under the emergency powers. Shutting down parliamentary debate, ignoring letters from hundreds of doctors expressing concerns about the public health risks of lockdowns and so forth. Daniel Andrews has trampled all over democracy and spat in the face of the people that elected him, whether these people realise it or not. Enshrining this ban in the Constitution will essentially allow the Andrews government to govern from the grave. Yeah, that's a fair statement. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. I'll put it in my Telegram group, and also I'll send it to my email subscribers. Scott Morrison received second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. So once again, Scott Morrison up there on centre stage, taking the jab, saying, hey, look how great it is. If I can do it, you can do it too. Sitting alongside one of our great war veterans, okay? So I think that's a particularly classless act, exploiting one of our great diggers as a means of pushing the vaccine on Australia. Classless act, and I can't say I'm surprised, coming from a man who has been very, very eager to strip away our freedoms and who has lied to the Australian people, I say. Scott Morrison said the vaccine wouldn't be compulsory. He said we won't hold you down and make you take it. And now we see these extraordinary coercive measures employed by the government to compel Australians to get vaccinated. And we see the risk of losing access to public and private services should we not be vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine. Scott Morrison is an absolute snake. Moving forward. All right, so here we go. This was from January, but worth noting since we're on the topic of Scott Morrison. COVID-19 vaccine advertising campaign to target specific fears. All right, so you need to ask yourself the question, if this vaccine was so great, if it is the savior of mankind, why does the government need to pump millions of dollars into convincing us? Generally, if something is a good idea, the results speak for itself, okay? We know that walking at the beach is a nice idea. It's a good idea. It's good for your health, right? We don't need to convince anyone of it because the proof is in the pudding. I'm going to read to you here from the Sydney Morning Herald. Young women, migrants and Indigenous Australians will be given the hard sell on the coronavirus vaccine when the government rolls out its $24 million advertising campaign within weeks. $24 million funded by you and me, the Australian taxpayer. That's right. The government using our money for this purpose to push a drug that we never asked for and that we don't want. Says here, campaigns targeting priority groups are being developed after research commissioned by the Federal Department of Health late last year, obtained by the Herald and The Age, found women aged 30 to 39 were the most likely to hold concerns about the vaccine's safety. I'm going to keep reading here. University of Sydney vaccine hesitancy expert Julie... I just wanted to make sure the sound was working. Sorry, I'm going to start that paragraph again. University of Sydney vaccine hesitancy expert. So we've got vaccine hesitancy experts now. What do you do for a living? I'm a vaccine hesitancy expert. Are you kidding me? Look at the language that they're using. This is extraordinary. Julie Lesk said targeted messaging was vital, especially for demographics that might be susceptible to anti-vaccination messaging from, quote, influencers on social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. What is she saying here, especially for demographics that might be susceptible? What demographics are you referring to there, Julie? You might want to make that a little bit more clear. Are you saying that certain people in society are more susceptible to, quote, messaging? But isn't that exactly what the government is doing, messaging? We saw the trial going on with the Yale University, which is all in regards to compelled vaccine consumption messaging. Do it for your community. Don't be selfish. Hey, you don't want to kill grandma. You don't want to be a coward, right? Only the brave get vaccinated. Are you brave? So it's interesting how they like to have it both ways. Utilizing coercive messaging that is of a psychologically manipulative language, whilst on the other hand, claiming they're lashing out against messaging that goes against their agenda. Do you see the paradox here? All right, so here we go. This guy, another public enemy, Greg Hunt. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt said the 24 million campaign would use social and traditional media to make sure Australians felt confidence in the vaccine. Okay, he understood women who were pregnant, trying to conceive, or who had young families were likely to have many questions about the vaccine. Women who are pregnant absolutely have a lot of questions about the vaccine, and concerns, of course, have been raised specifically in regards to pregnant women and the potential risks involved in taking the COVID-19 vaccine. Let's take a look. All right, so we've got this campaign here, right? Millions of dollars. Greg Hunt says that pregnant women are concerned about the vaccine. So let's take a look here at gov.uk. So this is the official government website of the United Kingdom. And again, I'm going to put this in the Telegram group. Many vaccines can be given safely in pregnancy. So what is the advice about this vaccine? This vaccine as in the COVID-19 vaccine. It says here, the vaccines have not yet been tested in pregnancy. So until more information is available, those who are pregnant should not routinely have this vaccine. Non-clinical evidence is required before any clinical studies in pregnancy can start. And before that, it is usual to not recommend routine vaccination during pregnancy. Yet, of course, we have here in Australia a $24 million advertising campaign, and Greg Hunt specifically mentioning women who are pregnant. Okay, so what is it, Greg Hunt? I mean, I called it from the start. Greg Hunt has violated his duty of care to the Australian people and is concerned with nothing more than advancing his career, even if that means putting the safety of the public at risk. That is my firm belief. Greg Hunt must go. All right, moving forward. I wanted to touch on this again, ladies and gentlemen. I spoke about this in the last show, but I want to do it again in another show, and it's only going to take a minute because I feel it's really important, and maybe you missed it. So this was from when Greg Hunt went to hospital, okay? This article was published a few days ago. Greg Hunt, diagnosed with bacterial infection, remains in hospital. Health Minister Greg Hunt has ended speculation his hospitalisation was linked to a COVID-19 vaccine, revealing why he was admitted. All right, so he ended the speculation and he made the great reveal as to why he was admitted to hospital. Okay, so what did he have? Why did Greg Hunt go to hospital? It says here, quote, overnight testing confirmed Minister Hunt's diagnosis to be cellulitis, a bacterial infection in his leg, a statement from his office read. All right, now, going back to gov.uk, we're going to take a look at the side effects of the Astrazeneca vaccine, which is the vaccine that Greg Hunt took, and he shortly went to hospital afterwards. All right, so this is from gov.uk, and we're going to look at this document that says COVID-19 vaccine Astrazeneca analysis print. Open it up in a new tab, looking at the side effects here under bacterial infections, and here we have cellulitis, with 140 total cases and one being fatal. So cellulitis, a known side effect to this vaccine, as reported by the UK government. Greg Hunt, of course, had the confirmation of a diagnosis of cellulitis, yet it was announced to the public that there is no link to the vaccine. So how can the government be so sure? A better article, a better question would be, Greg Hunt diagnosed with cellulitis being a known side effect of the Astrazeneca vaccine. We are investigating further. But instead, they came out and said there's no link, there's no correlation between Greg Hunt's hospitalization and taking the vaccine. We've looked into it, just take our words for it. So which leaves us with a question, which is Greg Hunt's diagnosis of cellulitis completely isolated from his consumption of the Astrazeneca vaccine? Is it just a coincidence he happened to develop a known side effect of this vaccine after taking the vaccine? Or is Greg Hunt completely full of it, and is he lying to the Australian public? That is my question for you. I don't know the answer, so put in the comments what you think. All right, moving forward here. Here we go. Some news from Qantas. Qantas begins trialling vaccine passport app. We all saw this coming, starting with international repatriation flights. Qantas has begun trialling a smartphone app that verifies whether passengers have tested negative to or have been vaccinated against COVID before they fly internationally. Okay, we all know. The airline conducted its first customer trial of the, quote, Common Pass app on an international repatriation flight from Frankfurt to Darwin this week after testing it with crew last month. Common Path is one of the several apps that have been developed to offer passengers a secure way to verify COVID test results, vaccinations, and health declarations to government officials or airline staff. All right, so it's starting. Are they going to make this COVID app mandatory for crossing state borders? It looks like it's coming for international travel. You know, a reporter on 9 News said, hey, the only restrictions you'll have if you don't get the COVID-19 vaccine will be international travel. We played the clip on a show a few shows back. And of course, we see Scott Morrison working with the New South Wales government to roll out a vaccine pass similar to what Israel has, their, quote, green pass, to grant people access into clubs, bars and nightclubs, but only if you've had the COVID-19 vaccination. You wouldn't want to be one of those cowardly, selfish, unvaccinated people, would you? No. So stick this in your arm and shut up. That's what they're telling you. And Qantas has been on board with this from the start. All right, let's keep it rolling. We spoke about this the other day, which was several European countries suspend Astrazeneca vaccinations over blood clot fears. And once again, we saw French and EU regulators, and we see regulators and health departments all over the world saying nothing to be worried about. We're pulling these vaccines, but there's no need for anyone else to halt vaccinations. Look, EU regulators say there's no need to halt vaccinations. Well, the plot thickens. Here we have Astrazeneca COVID vaccine suspended in Ireland over blood clot fears, despite UK regulators saying it's safe. And we see this pattern all over the world. I'm going to play you a little clip here from thesun.co.uk, and this is regarding the suspension. Follows the likes of Italy, Denmark, Latvia and Thailand that stopped using the jabs after reports of blood clots in Norway. I'll read you the subtitles. Facing a second wave, Ireland has been pushing the pharmaceutical firm to speed up its deliveries. But the country's medical authorities have now said Ireland will pause the use of the jab as a precaution. UK regulators have reassured the jab is safe and say there's no evidence it causes fatal blood clots. EU regulators and the World Health Organization have also rebuffed the blood clot fears.
It is not overreaction because obviously it needs to be checked, but these countries stopped vaccinating people with AstraZeneca only for 14 days, so it will be resumed in 14 days. As far as we know, this vaccine is safe and effective.
As far as we know, the vaccine's safe and effective, yet several nations are suspending the vaccine, more suspending the vaccine every single day. Does this woman realize the disservice she is committing to society and societies all over the world?
And obviously everything needs to be checked after it's reported, but at the moment we don't have any reason to think that this vaccine might cause such disorders.
No reason to think they might cause disorders, but let's just can the vaccine rollout. So you've got Greg Hunt, you've got Scott Morrison. They see what's going on in Europe. They see what's going on in Ireland and many other countries as well. And they're saying, hey, no problem. Just keep it rolling. Stick this in your arm. Hey, what's happening in Europe might not happen here. And instead, what do? They pump millions of dollars into an advertising campaign in order to compel Australians to take the COVID-19 vaccine. So there you go. Ireland has suspended the use of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine over blood clot concerns. Follows nations such as Denmark, Iceland, Norway, who have all stopped using the COVID jabs. Says Ireland's been pushing the pharmaceutical firm to speed up its deliveries. But now Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roman Glenn, has said Ireland will pause the use of the AstraZeneca jab as a precaution. He said it's not been concluded that there is any link between the COVID-19 vaccine, AstraZeneca, and these cases. All right, there's never any proof. You know, somebody takes the vaccine, dies a few hours later. Oh, it was something else. No proof. But UK regulators have reassured the jab is safe and say there is no evidence it was the cause of fatal blood clots. Right, okay. Yet somebody turns up a positive PCR test dies a few weeks later. COVID got him. But hold on a second. John had cancer and he had other conditions. No, COVID got him. That's where it ends, okay? I think that we all see the incredible double standard, right? The disparity between when health authorities, governments, and media report on so-called COVID deaths as opposed to when they report on vaccine deaths, right? I think we all see the very clear disparity, and when such disparities exist, one can only conclude that there is an agenda at play. All right, so I'll post this in my Telegram group. You can go and read it. All right, so here we go from the Australian. So despite everything going on in Europe and all the countries suspending Astrazeneca, it's fine because no extra danger in latest vaccine scare. That's right, coming from the Australian. So Australia's Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly has dismissed concerns that Astrazeneca vaccine may be linked with blood clots as Prime Minister Scott Morrison continued to defend the speed of the nation's vaccine rollout. Well, I guess no one needs to worry now because Paul Kelly, without giving any reasoning or without giving any scientific basis for his statements, has simply dismissed concerns. All right, so now that Paul Kelly has dismissed concerns, I suppose that nobody needs to be concerned anymore. Just don't do your own research. Don't look into blood clots. Don't look into the side effects of the Astrazeneca vaccine. You don't need to do any of that because Paul Kelly has dismissed concerns. Professor Kelly said the Australian government did not believe people who received the AstraZeneca jab were at any greater risk. No, we don't believe it. Look at the language we're using. All these countries shutting down AstraZeneca. No, we don't believe it. We don't believe they're at greater risk. Nah, wouldn't think so. Anyway, moving forward. Coming from the Epoch Times opinion, the biggest COVID-19 vaccine skeptics, frontline healthcare workers. This is pretty interesting. This was a study done, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. I'm just going to read to you the first paragraph and then go through a little bit of the study. And once again, I'll post it in my group. I'm going to read a couple comments. Shazza says, Morgan, what about the Navy crew jabs? Did you see the post? I did, Shazza. I've been receiving lots of messages from people concerned about potential issues on one of our ships through the Navy with the vaccines. I've been speaking to people. I've been speaking to some people who are related to people on the ships, but unfortunately I've yet to I haven't been able to independently verify something. So I can't really talk about it right now. I've put the word out there. Anyone on the ship, member of the Navy, who wants to speak to me, it could be anonymously, I'm all ears. But until that happens, I don't think I can really go into it, any further. So, but I am concerned about it though. I'll say that. All right. So, yeah, the study came from a company called Gallup. Okay. Now, some of you may be unaware. This is not some airy-fairy website. I'll just give you a quick overview of the company Gallup. Gallup Inc. is an American analytics and advisory company based in Washington, D.C., founded by George Gallup in 1935. The company became known for its public opinion polls conducted worldwide. Starting in the 1980s, Gallup transitioned its business to focus on providing analytics and management consulting to organizations globally. So it's been around for a long time. This is not just some analytics organization that fell out of the sky. So this is coming from the Gallup website here. Frontline workers no keener than others to get the vaccine. So what we see here is, according to the analysis by Gallup, 51% of healthcare workers and first responders polled in December were unconvinced of the merits of getting vaccinated, even if the vaccine was, quote, free, available, FDA approved, and 90% effective. So why is it that all of these healthcare workers are expressing concerns about the vaccine? These are industry insiders. These are professionals. So if we go back to the Gallup website right here, and once again, I'll post it in my Telegram group and my email subscribers via mcjreport.com. It says here, 49% of healthcare workers, first responders would get the COVID-19 vaccine. Those who got flu vaccine are more likely to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Makes sense. It says here, amid nationwide efforts to vaccinate the population against COVID-19, 49% of healthcare workers and first responders say they agree to get it. 34% said they would not, and 18% said they did not know whether or not they would agree to get the vaccine. All right, so that's 49% saying yes, and essentially 51% either saying no or saying they're not sure. There's lots more information in this study. There's charts, there's graphs. I'll send it to you and you can read through it in a bit more detail in your own time. All right, so moving on to some different information here. Moving on to Myanmar. Many of you know Myanmar, the people have been engaged in huge protests since the military takeover after their last election. Millions of people have been protesting and it has been fatal. That's right. The military have been very violent against unarmed protesters in Myanmar, and many people have died at the hands of the military. We hope that we don't get to that sort of point here in Australia, but it's important to keep note of what's going on around the world. So this is from Voice of America. This is the United States state broadcaster. I'm going to read to you a little bit here to give a bit of an overview on some of the things happening over there. Leaked documents suggest fraying of China-Myanmar ties. All right. Leaked documents obtained by Voice of America revealed China asked Myanmar's military government late last month to tighten pipeline security during an ongoing anti-coup protests, suggesting growing tension in what seemed to be a cozy relationship between the neighboring nations. Beijing asked for increased security around the pipeline and help with encouraging more positive news media coverage of China during a February 23rd meeting with Burmese officials. Shortly afterward, Myanmar's generals hired a lobbyist to publicly distance their unpopular regime from China. So what we're seeing here is a bit of a conflict between the military overlords of Myanmar and the Chinese Communist Party. They're not getting along that well. Okay, and I'll explain to you why I think that is in a minute. Says here, quote, China seeking assurances from a brutal and hated regime is the worst one could do at a time like this. Kin Za-Win, founder of the Yangon think tank, Tampadida Institute, told Voice of America on Thursday. The real problem is the coup, which the people see as a return to military dictatorship, which is pretty fair. That's what it looks like. You got the military bulldozing people in the street, shutting down democracy. Yeah, it kind of looks like a military dictatorship, you know, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, that sort of thing. The protests were triggered by the February 1 coup after the military claimed voter fraud in the November 8th general elections. More than 80% of voters backed up the pro-democracy party of Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Myanmar's electoral commission rejected allegations of fraud on January 28th. So the people of Myanmar are, of course, protesting against the military takeover, but they're also protesting against China's response. China having tremendous economic and commercial interests in Myanmar. The former government signed the Belt and Road Initiative with the Chinese Communist Party, deeply entangling the economy of Myanmar with China. And so now the Chinese Communist Party is concerned that their commercial interest in Myanmar could be disrupted due to the military takeover. So instead of condemning the violence in Myanmar, orchestrated by the military against the people, which is what most countries have done around the world, most countries have come out to condemn the violence committed on the people. China is instead basically sucking up to the military in Myanmar and trying to cozy up to them, because ultimately China is concerned that the military takeover could interfere with the Belt and Road Initiative and other Chinese commercial interests. So you've got all these people suffering and they're saying, hey, China doesn't care about us. They care about their factories, their roads, their bridges, and their pipelines. So just to back that up here, here's another article. This was from yesterday from RT. China demands end to violence and looting. So, oh my goodness. I mean, I almost can't believe what I'm reading here. This is so typical of the Chinese Communist Party and so reminiscent of their complete and utter disregard for human life. It's almost like when you think they can't be any more unsympathetic to the basic decency of humanity, there they go again. I'm going to read this. China demands end to violence and looting of its factories in Myanmar as 39 reported killed in anti-coup protests. So China's not demanding an end to the violence against innocent people. China is demanding an end to the violence against Chinese owned factories, because ultimately that's what matters for China. Economics by far supersedes human rights in China. That's why there are no human rights in China. Any good dictatorship doesn't have time for human rights, because human rights just get in the way of economic expansion and military expansion. So I'm going to just read to you here. At least 38 protesters and one police officer were killed in Myanmar on Sunday. That was in one day alone. There's been many more killed, with most casualties reported in the capital Yangon, where demonstrators set Chinese finance factories on fire. So as you can see, the demonstrators clearly identify that China doesn't care who's in power, whether it was a democratically elected leader or a brutal dictatorship. China cares about their business. You know, it's like the mafia. Nothing gets in the way of our business. And the people of Myanmar are recognizing this and protesting against China's willingness to support a brutal dictatorship. So there you go. Bit of footage here. There's not much going on here. You see tear gas being fired at the protesters. Open fire. The Myanmar military, they opened fire, live rounds of ammunition on unarmed protesters. So probably the Chinese Communist Party admires that type of behavior. They did it to their own people in Tiananmen Square. They see it as a normal means of going about their business. Anyway, moving forward. This is an interesting story. Ukraine seizes aircraft maker to prevent Chinese takeover. Now, we should be doing a lot more of this in Australia. Obviously, Scott Morrison put through the Foreign Relations Bill, which is supposedly designed for the purpose of safeguarding strategic Australian assets and preventing the widespread foreign acquisition of Australian businesses, land, resources, things like that. When I speak about strategic assets, I'm speaking about things such as ports, airstrips, mining rights, and so forth. Electricity, water, for instance. So it says here, the government of Ukraine announced Thursday that it would seize Motorsich, a private corporation that specializes in building jet engines and other military hardware, and return it to the people after multiple attempts by a Chinese company to buy it. So this is a typical strategy by the Chinese Communist Party. The way they see it is, instead of investing in development and research, China would prefer to purchase companies from around the world, particularly from Western nations. Why invest in research and development when you can purchase a company that has engaged in that research and development for many decades on end? It's cheaper to do so. It's also similar to the Chinese 1,000 Talents program, where China goes around the world poaching experts from different fields. We've lost many experts from Australia due to this Thousands Talents program. It goes along the lines of China will come into Australia, they'll identify somebody that they need for the Chinese Communist Party, such as maybe a scientist or some type of researcher, offer that person far more than what they could be paid in Australia, and in a single moment, China has acquired a lifetime of knowledge. Again, why invest in research and development when you can simply buy it in a second from other nations that have done all that research and development already? The same can also be said for intellectual property theft from China. Why research and develop when you can simply invest in cyber hacking teams that can steal that research and development? This is the Chinese model, and this is how they've been able to advance so quickly over a short period of time. You don't need to come up with anything on your own. Just either buy it from someone or steal it. Moving on here, just going to read you a little bit more of this news article. Last month, Ukraine sanctioned a Chinese company, Beijing Sky Risen Aviation, for attempting to take over Motorsich. Ukrainian officials protested that Motorsich is too important for the Ukrainian military to allow it to be bought by a foreign actor. How come nobody stood up for the port of Darwin? Isn't the port of Darwin too important to be taken over by China? Supposedly not, according to our government. I wonder who the treasurer was at the time. Was it Scott Morrison? My timeline eludes me, but Scott Morrison as treasurer most definitely gave the thumbs up to many Chinese takeovers, so remember that. And it says here, Sky Risen posed a national security threat. Okay, makes sense. China poses a national security threat. Don't sell them the strategic asset that they want. Zelensky, who's the president there, unilateral actions against China despite Ukraine's minimal economic power to confront China, and the fact that it remains embroiled in a civil war against Russia-backed separatists in its east, defied much of Kiev's attitude towards China before the comedian and outsider, former, right, took the presidency. Ukraine remains, due to its past policy, a member of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So there you go, they signed the Belt and Road Initiative, but still had at least some backbone to not sell this particular company to China. And yeah, so we all know what the Belt and Road Initiative is. All right, so yeah, just wanted to touch on that story pretty quickly. Just goes to show that just because China makes your country an offer to purchase a company or an asset does not mean you need to go through with it. Here we go. Russian agricultural exports soar nearly 30% as China and Turkey ramp up purchases. Just going to go through this really quickly. Exports of Russian agricultural products have increased by 28.1% in the first 2 months of 2021 against the same period a year ago. All right, now particularly to China. The list of top consumers of Russia's agricultural products is still topped by China, which has raised its imports of Russian food supplies to 822 million since the beginning of this year. That's 24.4% more than the nation purchased within the same period as 2020. So why is this? Well, China stopped buying our agricultural products, of course. Our politicians over the decades embedded our economy with China's and made us very dependent on the Chinese market. And of course, as soon as we butt heads with China, we saw it last year, China stopped purchasing many of our exports. Barley, beef, dairy, just to name a few, fruits, vegetables, etc. Because China knew that they could easily replace us, and it looks like they're replacing us with Russia. So this is what you get. This is what you get for short-sighted foreign policy. This is what you get for short-sighted trade. Yet the Scott Morrison government is now looking to ratify the world's biggest free trade agreement in history with who? China. Okay, so the Belt and Road Initiative gets thrown out, but Scott Morrison is head over heels to get into the world's biggest free trade agreement with China. And we're going to be covering that a lot more and what that could potentially mean for our future. Okay, coming from Breitbart, China urges World Health Organization to let it run global vaccine passport system. What could possibly go wrong, right? Handing the vaccine passport information of the world to the Chinese Communist Party. It's not as if they'd misuse that data. It's not as if they'd use it for surveillance or nefarious purposes, right? We can all trust the Chinese Communist Party to do the right thing. I mean, this is crazy. CCP party experts in inverted commas, urged the World Health Organization on Tuesday to let China build and run a global database for vaccine passports, documenting if every person on Earth has received a Chinese coronavirus vaccine. Says here, the Communist Party launched its domestic vaccine passport system Wednesday, despite World Health Organization officials urging countries to not implement such a system due to unequal access to vaccines and the variety and the quality of the available offerings around the world. The quote, vaccine passport, a digital certification that confirms a person who has received the COVID vaccine, joins China's larger social credit system, which judges every citizen and awards them numerical scores based on how much the party approves of their behavior, right? The behavior judged can vary from littering and volunteering, which results in lower or higher social credit scores, to the display of public opinions either in favor or against the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, I mean, it's not unrealistic to see that happening in Australia. The social credit score, do something the government likes, you get a point. Do something the government doesn't like, you lose a point. I mean, pretty similar to a vaccine passport. The government's saying, hey, you know, do the right thing by your community, be brave, do it for the country, and we will reward you with, you get to go overseas, you get to access health services, you get to access, you know, whatever it might be, educational services. But if you don't do what we want, you will be punished. So how is this vaccine situation any different from China's social credit system? It's named differently, but essentially it produces the same outcome. All right, we're getting through it all. I know there's quite a bit of information here. We've got defense uses CCP-owned business to store our military data. So is Scott Morrison really taking measures to protect us from China? Or was the Foreign Relations Bill nothing more than I suppose, an empty gesture of protecting national security? This is coming from advanceaustralia.org.au. I'm going to read this to you. A significant proportion of Australia's politicians and bureaucrats either do not care or understand the threat posed to us by the CCP. That includes you, Scott Morrison. The CCP have been buying into data storage businesses contracted by our government to store sensitive information. What could possibly go wrong? For a decade now, Australia's sensitive military files have been stored by Global Switch, a company bought out by a Chinese consortium in 2017 for $4 billion. In response to concerns about the arrangement, then Treasurer Scott Morrison promised strict new conditions had been placed on the Australian operations, meaning Defence would begin shifting its data back to a government-owned hub once the contract expired. However, 4 years later, the promise still hasn't been fulfilled. In fact, not only has the Defence Department delayed its exit from Global Switch, but it signed a new deal with the company last year, and still the public has only found out now. Although Defence has tried to assure the Australian people that the GSU data centre remains subject to stringent Foreign Investment Review Board controls and there are appropriate physical security arrangements in place, it's just not good enough, right? I mean, China, a regime that since its inception has lied and taken advantage of the global commerce arena to build their economy throughout the years, intellectual property theft, data theft. They stole from the African Union headquarters. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Information regarding the United States F-35 fighter jets ended up in China. And we're supposed to believe that China would never touch our military data, store it in a Chinese company. But no, that's just a line that the Chinese Communist Party wouldn't cross. They'd do a lot of things, but they would never steal Australian military data, all right? That's basically what the government's telling you. The government thinks that you're stupid. It says here, Australians have no faith in the Foreign Investment Review Board. That's right, we don't. It says here, after all, it was these people who reviewed almost 1,200 applications in 10 years and rejected only 5. And Scott Morrison was treasurer for a lot of those applications and gave the thumbs up to many, many Chinese takeovers. That's right, Scott Morrison. I do not forget, and the Australian people will not forget either, what you did. Okay, moving on here to something a bit lighter. We've got some news from Amsterdam. We've got a scene from a nightclub. It looks like they're trying to, what can I say? COVID normal, right? Go to the nightclub, put your hazmat suit on and dance in a little square. I'm going to play this clip for you.
Well, what we're looking for with the Field Lab research program is how can we set up an alternative measures across, let's say, the general measures we have here in the Netherlands, like for very important, the 1.5 meter social distancing measure. We're looking for the alternative, but still we're looking for how can we aim and get more visitors to our concert, but still have a safe concert in time of Corona.
And how long till the results of this are processed? And do you have any indication now as to what these results might show?
Well, we divided our event range in 4 different types, and per type we're having 2 pilot events in the last weeks and 2 upcoming weeks.
I mean, that just looks ridiculous. Dancing around in these costumes, people in Amsterdam thinking that it's completely normal, but not all people, you know, they
still
protest
need, let's
as
say,
well.
3 weeks for internally analyzing and festivals, yes.
Okay. So here we go. This is also
fed up
from
with
Amsterdam.
COVID-19 restrictions, around 2,000 protesters faced off with police in The Hague. They're angry about the Netherlands' strict pandemic lockdown and are urging people to oust Prime Minister Mark Rutte at this week's General